welcome to the Vertebrate Paleontology and Evolutionary Development Lab. So in this lab, we do a couple of different things. For one, we look at the fossil record of animals, and then we also look at the bones of some living animals to help us understand better the animals that we're seeing in the fossil record. Okay, so here we have a really cool specimen of a sample from Nova Scotia that comes from the time period that we primarily work on here in the lab. So this is a 310 million year old tree stump, and you can actually see the pieces of plant material, the carbon, the charcoal on here. But what's really special about these in particular is that during this time, sometimes animals fell inside these empty tree stumps, and we have the preserved remains of some of the earliest land animals preserved in these. So here's the skull of a tiny little animal that would have been one of our first to walk on land. Okay, so here we are again with another specimen from Nova Scotia, and this is actually a skeleton that was found inside one of those tree stumps. And what we're looking at here, actually, now that we have it all nice and cleaned up in the lab, is we're actually looking at the skeleton of an animal that is more closely related to us than it is to a reptile, even though it looks a lot like a reptile. So here's the backbone, the vertebral column, your spine, and then basically each of your leg bones, the femur, coming out here. And what was really cool when we discovered this specimen is that alongside this larger animal is the skull of a very tiny individual. And there are a few other little isolated bones of this animal. And we identified this as being a juvenile of the same species. And basically this is telling us that there is probably a parent and an offspring occupying this particular tree stump. And this is actually the earliest evidence of a parent animal taking care of its young for a prolonged period of time. So that was a really cool discovery made out in Nova Scotia. Sometimes in this lab, to understand what we're seeing in the fossil record, we look at some of our modern animals. So here we have the skeleton of a bird, and we can actually see the shape of those vertebrae, those backbone elements, that then allow us to interpret what we're seeing in the fossil forms. So we have a variety of different animals. This was a particular kind of bird, but we also collect a lot of reptiles, especially since a lot of the fossil animals we study are reptiles, as well as amphibians. But to understand sort of big picture evolutionary questions, we like to compare our material and our animals to as many different kinds of animals as possible that are alive today, including sometimes even mammals like this deer or caribou skull. Okay, so here's another technique that we apply in this lab often to be able to see the skeleton of sometimes really small animals. So what this method does here is actually we're taking a whole frog in this case, and we digest away most of the soft tissue, but it's still present, though transparent. And then we secondly apply a stain that basically stains all of the bone in a red color, and in some cases we can apply another stain that makes cartilage show up as blue. So this allows us to really see the sort of in situ presence of the skeleton in its natural form in an animal that's very small. So here, one of our students, Dana, is actually working on the images that were taken of some of those cleared and stained specimens. So basically, yeah, Dana, you can tell us what you can see or what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I am taking one of our cleared and stained specimens that fell apart while we were working on it. If it's whole, it'll look kind of like this. And I'm taking the parts of the frog that fell off and reassembling them so we can see what the whole skull should look like if we get all of the parts put in the right places, like our nicer specimens.